Tere jahimehed, oleme endiselt siin Ungaris Budapestis maailmanäitusel ja püüdsin kinni Danene'i, kes on siis Namiibia Jahimeeste Seltsi president. So, hello Danene.
Hi,
nice to see you.
Nice to be here, nice to talk with you.
Yeah, sure. So, briefly talk about African wildlife conservation and hunting. Like, there's usually stereotypes that there are so many exotic animals there, and just people around, usually from Europe, come there and just have an easy hunt that is not usually ethical. Mm-hmm. So how's the situation really there?
So in Namibia, it's a massive country and we've got a real big population of wildlife, and Namibia is actually an absolute example of wildlife conservation. One thing that people must remember is that, especially in Namibia, we're a very dry and arid country. We don't have other resources really like our neighboring countries with diamonds and oil and water even. It's a very dry country, so we're very dependent on our wildlife. So it would be very stupid for us to eradicate wildlife because we would take our whole livelihood away. Tourism in Namibia is a very, very important part of our GDP. And our people love wildlife. So in Namibia, conservation hunting is controlled very, very strictly by our government. When we do conservation hunting, we endeavor to hunt only post-productive animals. So if you look at our quota system, we take off about 2% on plains game animals, while they have a reproduction rate of 20%. So there's no way that hunting can ever have a negative effect on wildlife in Africa. And in fact, international clients that come and do conservation hunting really pay a high price for animals on the ground, which incentivize people to protect that wildlife much, much more. You can imagine it's like owning a house versus renting a house. If you rent it, you don't really look after it that well. In Namibia, our government gave 100% ownership of wildlife to the people on the land. So you can imagine how they protect it, because every animal that is being hunted, they get 100% of the benefits, and it's huge benefits. It's benefits that help them sustain their homes, that feed them, that put clear water, safe drinking water, but also help them to build a better future for anybody that grows up there. So it's an absolute rubbish if somebody say that we are eradicating wildlife because of hunting. Hunting gives value to our species, which is extremely important, and we have proven our conservation effort more than enough throughout the world. Today we've got 60% more wildlife than in the last 50 years ever in Namibia, and that's purely because of hunting and the incentives that hunting bring towards conservation ultimately, because ultimately what we need to protect is habitat. The world has a problem with total overpopulation. Habitats for animals are getting way too small through various factors, urbanization, crop plantation, deforestation, and this all has a very negative effect on habitat. And hunters, they only want habitat. They don't want to see fences or buildings or people. They want to see wild open spaces. So hunting really protects habitat, and habitat gives us wildlife.
That's great. Well, why we talk about this is actually because of we in Estonia have an African wildlife and like nature protection themed photography exhibition, and this famous photograph Nick brand is like has this huge exhibition on the walls, and it's very controversial, but yet so very delicately and beautifully
done.
And like the thing is that people don't usually get this, but he is trying to get people to think and act. And what would you say to them? Because usually people say that, oh, it's Africa, it's so far away, we don't care about it. But what would you say to them?
I would say that people need to understand that anything that's being done to to go against conservation hunting is to the detriment ultimately of the species. And everybody that tries to save the species must understand that as hunters we also do that. And we need to sit around a table to get together to understand that we all want the same thing. We're just doing it on different ways. But it's much better to be on the ground and not sit in a game viewer vehicle as a tourist and think that you are contributing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a fantastic way to do the photography like he's doing and to expose wildlife and the vulnerability of wildlife to people. And it's good to evoke a sense of protection. But the sense of protection comes from being on the ground, really doing the conservation work, really giving value to the animals and to protect it. I think there's really a misunderstanding when it comes to proper, ethical, legal conservation hunting instead of just poaching. I mean, poaching is something where illegally something is being done. It's an indiscriminate killing of anything, whereas conservation hunting is a specific animal that is not breeding any longer, preferably, that has no value anymore to the production of wildlife, and it is part of our human existence as human beings. Us humans are predators. We are the protectorates of wildlife, and therefore we protect it in that way as the circle of life actually closes on that. So it's good to have campaigns like that, but you need to be open-minded about it. You need to have respect for each other, and you need to look at facts and science, because if science and facts cannot convince you, then there's no place for you at the table to talk about it.
Okay, thank you so much.
Big pleasure. Thank you for your time.